the newscast honored as the best in Washington. This is Channel 5's Emmy Award-winning 10 o'clock news with Maury Povich and James Adams. Now, here's Maury Povich.
Good evening, everyone. James is off tonight and Morse Jones is sitting in. The formal meetings are over, and tonight the world is waiting for word on what, if any, agreements are being hammered out at the Superpower Summit in Geneva. And there is word tonight. The two most powerful men in the world are ready to announce plans for future summits and to visit each other's country. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev to the United States next year, President Reagan to the Soviet Union in 1987. Channel 5's Patrick McGrath reports from Geneva tonight that official word will come when the two world leaders will make a final joint appearance tomorrow morning.
On day 2 of the summit, the talks were hosted by the Soviets at their mission in Geneva. This time it was President Reagan who arrived by limousine to be greeted by Chairman Gorbachev. The news blackout announced yesterday was still in effect, so President Reagan had little to say. Mr. Gorbachev had a bit more to say.
We have a very lively discussion of everything. You may be sure that the discussion is lively.
So friendly?
In a frank, businesslike, and I think responsible way.
Once again, the two leaders ignored the formal schedule, which called for only 15 minutes of one-on-one talks, and they met for more than 2 hours today. All told, they spent more than half of their time in these one-on-one meetings. But with those talks private and news about them blacked out, the two first ladies shared much of the spotlight. Nancy Reagan and Raisa Gorbachev jointly laid the cornerstone of the International Museum of the Red Cross. The attractive and stylish first ladies have drawn enormous press coverage. Their clothes are described and compared in elaborate detail, and their comings and goings closely watched. Headline writers are describing missile wars and tea summits. Mrs. Reagan doesn't think much of it.
I really think that's a little silly. I mean, this is very important things being discussed here. And what somebody wears or doesn't wear really isn't careful.
But the president's chief of staff, Donald Regan, apparently does not agree with the first lady. He told a Washington reporter who covers social events that her women readers are more interested in the summit's human interest stories than with complicated stories about missile throw weight and Afghanistan. Both Mr. Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev were asked about that.
I don't think he meant it to be interpreted in that way at all. He was simply adding to that interest that they also had an interest in children, the human touch.
My view is that both men and women in the United States and the Soviet Union all over the world are interested in having peace for themselves and being sure that this peace would be kept stable and lasting for the future. And for that, they are interested in the reduction of the numbers of weapons.
The summit talks ended tonight at a dinner that the Reagans threw for the Gorbachevs. Aides to both leaders had been working feverishly for hours to draw up summit agreements and a way to present them. After dinner, the aides reported to the two leaders, and the summit agreements were sealed with a handshake.
The leaders of the United States and the Soviet Union will participate in a ceremony at the Geneva International Conference Center on Thursday at 10 a.m.
Although Speaks would not disclose details, a former State Department official said the presidential assistants who worked on the agreements are very happy indeed tonight. He said there will be a cultural agreement signed tomorrow and perhaps others. The official said the Reagan administration got what it wanted from this summit. Patrick McGrath, Metro Media News, Geneva.
Back to Chief of Staff Reagan's remarks. They're stirring the wrath of women here in Washington. One saying in her words that the president brought bonzo to the summit. Channel 5's Mary Norton reports women on Capitol Hill are calling on the Treasury Secretary, the Chief of Staff that is, to apologize.
At home in Washington, swift reaction to Donald Reagan's remarks from people in and out of government, Democrats and Republicans alike.
I think it was a real put down. I think they wrote an apology. I must say, I'm surprised there's anyone in America who still thinks that. I'm even more surprised that if they think that, they say it. And I'm totally stunned that there's a person who thinks it, says it, and is paid by the taxpayers and is in a prominent role in this administration.
I find that the women in my constituency are very concerned about national security, about the whole defense issue. So I think it was an unfortunate remark, but as I said, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'd like to see the whole conversation and hope that he's a little further along than that in his education.
It's a suggestion that women haven't got enough sense or an ability intellectually to understand the games, the war games that men play. Of course, we like to play peace games, but we do understand, and that's why we're going to be heard from more and more, and that's why we're here.
A former UN ambassador dealt less harshly with the White House chief of staff.
The kindest thing that one can say about those remarks is that they must distort his meaning. He cannot have meant what he seems to have said.
Thoughts here on the Hill have already been translated into action. Today, the Congressional Caucus for Women's Issues drafted a letter to President Reagan demanding an apology for Reagan's remarks. The letter calls those remarks an extraordinary insult, not only to American women, but to women worldwide. On the streets of the Capitol, men and women seem to share similar views about the development, many of them wondering what Reagan could have been thinking of.
Oh, wow. I think that the man has finally reached the age of senility. I really do.
I think it shows that maybe he's not quite in touch with what's going on in America and the gains that American women have made.
One woman on her way home from work sums up her view very simply.
I think he's wrong.
Some Washington political observers say this reminds them of one other incident involving a Reagan staffer. Mary Norton, Channel 5 News, Washington.
One side effect of the summit may be a new effort to bring peace to the Middle East. And Assistant Secretary of State Richard Murphy is being sent on a month-long mission to major cities in Israel and neighboring countries to brief them on the summit.